Let's go back a few lessons where we looked at comparisons. And we saw that whenever we output something where we have 5 equals 5, and we see that it returns back a Boolean value. We could do 5 is less than 9, returns back true. 5, or we could pick another number, is greater than 2, true, greater than 9, false. So we saw when we do these comparisons, we return back a Boolean value. And we can make use of these Boolean values within conditional statements. Conditional statements basically allow us to apply some logic into our application. So we can do something like this using the if statement and check to see if a particular value is equal or if the condition is true. So we can say if true, and let's refresh that, and you can see the output in the console was true. So if this is false, we refresh and we see nothing gets output in the console. So the same thing goes for when we do 5 equals 5. We know that JavaScript does the computation here, and it checks to make sure that this computation returns back a Boolean value, and when it does return back that Boolean value, if it was true, then it will output true because we've got that within the console condition. So essentially this is the block of code. So just like what we saw within the functions, these curly brackets contain a block of code that gets executed, and this only gets executed if this condition is true. Then we can apply any one of those conditional statements that we have in there, and we can apply it, refresh it, so we know that 5 is not less than 3, but 5 is less than 8, and we're going to see that that gets output as true. We can also, where we saw before with the comparisons, we also saw that we had logical operators. So we could do combined statements where we can have one value here, and remember this is turning out and it's returning back true, and then we can apply additional condition. So we can do additional and, we can do an or and not. So both of these have to be true in order to output that value. So if one of these is false, then we're not going to see any type of output here. So both of them have to be true on the and. There's also the or, so those are the two pipes. So if either one of these is true, it's going to render this block of code. So even if one of them turns out to be false, so we know 5 is not greater than 8, so we see that it still renders that out. So that's the condition there, that both of them have to be true, and if both of them are false, so both of them turn out to be false, then we render out nothing, because those two lines indicate that that is or. So or, so if this is true or this is true. So let's bring this back down just to the one condition there and refresh it. And we see that it's not coming out. So let's 5 less than 8. Value when that condition is false, when that comparison is false, we can use else in order to output something. So if this is not true, we'll take the console log statement and write out, or we could have said false. So now what's happening here is that we're looking at this comparison. We're seeing that this is returning back false, the Boolean value of false. So we know that it can either be true or false. So it's returning back false with that condition. So that's why this block of code is getting executed. We can also add in one other parameter as well, or we could add in more else if statements. So we can do else if, and we can see if 5 is equal to 5, then it will render out that value. And if else, we can add in another else there at the bottom, and we can just say not true. A, and set that variable of A to 5. So now we've got a bunch of values here. So we see if A is less than 8 or greater than 8, or we can see that if A is equal to 8. So we'll just write out equal here, was less than 8. So we have 3 different possibilities here. Was more than 8, was less than 8, or was equal. So let's refresh it, and we see that initially 5 was less than 8. So what if we update this, and if we write out 8, so we say now it's equal, and let's do 9, and was more than 8. So that's how we can apply logic into our applications. So now it's up to you. Give it a try, create a variable, update the number, and then see all the different types of conditions and outputs that you can produce.